Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen and welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut ReFLEXions. We're here every Monday at 4:30 PM to look back on the weekend's boxing action. And the biggest fight over this past weekend was Caleb Plant defending his IBF super middleweight title for the third time against namesake Caleb Truax. And now, no doubt, who is the best Caleb, certainly in the 168-pound division, as Plant pounded out a lopsided, indeed a shutout, unanimous decision over his challenger. A lot of talk in the build-up was about Plant and him fighting Canelo Alvarez in the future. Canelo's made it clear his short-term goal is to unify all the belts at 168 pounds. It was revealed a day or two before the fight that a deal had been struck. I don't know if contracts have been signed, but a deal had certainly been struck for Canelo to fight Billy Joe Saunders, the WBO champion, thus unifying, a draw aside, thus unifying 3 of the 4 major belts at 168 pounds in May, assuming Canelo gets past Abney Yildirim without any injuries or cuts or anything of that nature that might delay the Saunders fight. This wasn't altogether unsurprising given that Canelo had signed a 2-fight deal with DAZN and Matchroom Boxing USA. It was always going to be a DAZN/Matchroom fighter in the opposite corner in May after the Yildirim fight. So Saunders was the front runner, and indeed that looks to be the case now that he will be. It's a fight he's chased for a long time. Glad for him that he's finally got it, and we'll see what he can do. But assuming Canelo gets through both Yildirim and Saunders, Plant is looking for that fight in September. He said he hurt his left hand early on in the fight against Truax, but it should be well healed up by September. He was never really likely to be fighting Canelo on that May date, and obviously Canelo usually fights May and September. This year he's also fighting in February, of course, February the 27th against Yildirim, and maybe even later in the year, depending on how 2021 progresses for him. But getting back to Plant, we have to analyse him in the context of a potential Canelo opponent. I rate Canelo as the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport today. So it's quite a high bar that we have to judge Plant on. So let's take the positives first. Caleb Truax, obviously a durable operator. I know he got blasted out in a round by Anthony Dirrell, but that looks more like an aberration. The only other time he's been beaten inside the distance, he went right into the final, 12th and final round against a big, strong Danny Jacobs, and gave a good account of himself in that fight as well. Obviously beat James DeGale and then lost the IBF belt back to DeGale in their rematch. So a sturdy operator, but at 37 years old has undoubtedly seen better days. But that said, tough, sturdy, took a lot of punishment, face was bloodied, was jabbed ridiculous amount of times by Plant in their fight. So you can't judge Plant too harshly about that. His work rate was very solid and consistent. His left hand work in particular, even given the fact that he injured it early, he still used it prolifically in the second half of the fight. His jab was excellent. His lead left hook was a real good shot, and he doubled it up sometimes to body and head, which was particularly good for offsetting the much slower Truax. So that was good from him. His defense wasn't too bad. He moved his head quite well, but there wasn't a lot coming back. You would think against someone who throws more shots, like a Canelo, for example, you would see more of his defensive skills. Ring IQ, not too bad. He's very athletic, Caleb Plant. Very fast, very strong. Sometimes it did seem like some of the movements were just there out of habit or because he wanted to showcase some of his skills rather than they were the most effective way to either close the distance or increase it, depending on what he was trying to do in the fight. So I'm not sure quite how good his ring IQ is, but again, we need to see him in against a real test. And it's a credit to him that he, in 3 defenses against Mike Lee, Vincent Feigenbutz, and now Caleb Truax, we haven't really seen him pushed. We haven't seen him have to find that next level. Now, you could criticise that as well and say, well, the level of opposition is not good enough. And I understand that. But he's certainly proved himself a level above those people. So, fair play to him for that. Now, let's look at the flip side. Obviously, that was coming. We can't just extol the positives. I thought Truax wasn't a great opponent. I thought a couple of years ago he might have given him a tougher fight, but his feet pretty slow these days. And against BoxRec says they're both 6 foot. Plant looked taller, both at the weigh-in. I know he's wearing big shoes, but also in the fight itself. Maybe he just stands a bit more upright than Truax does, but he certainly looked bigger and was definitely rangier. And against a guy like that, you really have to move your feet fast to get into range and then fast to get back out. And Truax was unable to do that. He just didn't have the speed of foot. And also moved his head a bit on the way in, but then kind of stayed static on the inside. But the worst thing Truax did was at the times when he did get into mid-range or even close range with his feet, and there were times he was able to do that, despite the slowness we were talking about, he didn't throw. So he was allowing Plant to dictate the pace even once he was at optimum range for him. And it's not good because Plant had the time to think, punch and move all before Truax had really set himself. And part of that was because Plant was so busy and he was throwing out that jab and that lead left hook frequently. So it made Truax quite apprehensive about coming in and letting his own hands go in case he got countered by the faster, sharper operator. And that's understandable, but if he were to have any chance against a much bigger, fresher, younger guy, Truax really had to take risks, and he didn't seem keen on doing so. And after getting kind of beaten up and bloodied early in the fight, you can understand why. But against the Canelo, you've got to think that his upper body movement, which is excellent, and his footwork, which is much improved and much faster than it used to be, he'll be able to get into range more easily, and he won't be afraid to let his hands go at the right times, because he'll have the ability to move out of the way, to dip and to roll away from Plant's punches, no matter how fast they're coming. Canelo has proved himself to be an intelligent defensive operator, and his timing and accuracy is really second to none. So I think he'll certainly have more success in that fight. Plant, it's very much going to depend on how he uses that judgment of distance, because it seemed great against Truax. He was always at, not always, but for the most part of the fight, he was fighting at a pace and at a distance, a range that suited him. Against Canelo, I don't think that'll be as easy, because Canelo is better at cutting the ring off, faster on his feet, and better at knowing how to use feints, both with his feet, his hands, his shoulders, to get the other person to throw first and then counter. Plant is exceptionally comfortable in the role of a counter puncher. He likes to sit on that back foot, move laterally, pop out his jab, wait for his opponent to throw, and Truax didn't do much of it, but wait for his opponent to throw and then counter over the top or around the sides. Against Canelo, who's an adept counter-puncher himself, it will be more of a chess match. And also the fact that Plant's never been in at that level before, Canelo's far more experienced, particularly against quality opposition. You might see Plant for the first time in a long time, because he has been so dominant against a much lower level of fighter, second-guessing himself a little bit, being a bit more tentative, being more apprehensive about letting his own shots go. And if that happens, Canelo is the perfect fighter to take advantage of that. Now, obviously, we've still got to see Canelo go past Yildirim with no injury as well, get past Saunders, if that fight definitely takes place in May, to get to Plant in the first place. But if he does, it's a very intriguing matchup, and I don't think Plant did much in that fight to lower his standing and get people saying they now don't want him to fight Canelo. But I don't think he did much either to really press the issue. And partly you can blame the hand injury, and that's fine. But I think if he'd gone in and blasted Truax out, showing the full array of his skills in the first, 6 rounds, first half of the fight, I think people would then be clamouring and they'd say, I'm really disappointed Canelo's fighting Saunders in May. I'd much rather he fought Plant now after seeing that excellent performance. But much like Saunders against Martin Murray last year, he didn't do a lot wrong, but it wasn't a performance that would have people kind of jumping up and down saying, we really want to see him fight Canelo now. He's got a great chance. This is the fight we've been waiting for Canelo to have since those Triple G fights. So kind of half and half a little bit. There's positives and negatives. But Plant will now rest up. His hand will heal. If he's thinking he's going to be fighting Canelo in September, I don't see him taking another interim fight. He'll just be working hard to improve in the gym and watching on to see how Canelo gets on against Yildirim and then Saunders. I want to know what you guys think, though, because maybe I'm being a little too harsh on Caleb Plant. Let me know what you thought of the fight. I should say it wasn't available in the UK, but I managed to catch it on YouTube this morning. But let me know what you thought of it. Could he have done more? Could he have got Truax out of there, regardless of the hand injury? Should he have perhaps stepped up the pace, taken more risks against an opponent who wasn't really doing much back? Or was it more that, he knew that Truax was tough and sturdy and was going to go to 12 rounds, so he wisely and sensibly didn't take any risks and backed off and cruised to an easy 12-round decision? Let me know what you think about that. And also, what sort of chance do you give Plant against Canelo? How do you see them matching up style-wise? What sort of fight pattern do you expect? I'll be back next week for ReFLEXions, Monday at 4:30. But if you can't wait until then, I'll be here for FlexPectations this Thursday at 4:30 p.m. As always, really appreciate your time, and I will see you all soon. Cheers.